The lively cafe in Atlanta buzzed with activity, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with the murmur of conversation. Among the bustle, Ella, a young waitress with aspirations of becoming a songwriter, wove between tables with practiced grace. Her dark brown hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail, and the cafe's signature burgundy apron hugged her waist. As she worked, snippets of conversation with her coworkers punctuated her rhythm. "Hey, did you see the guy at table 12? Whispered Chloe, a fellow waitress, as they passed each other. "He's been sitting there nursing the same cup of coffee for over 2 hours now." Ella glanced at the table in question. "Maybe he's a struggling artist or something," she offered with a casual shrug. "Or maybe he's just cheap," Chloe retorted, her laughter light but teasing. Ella chuckled along, but there was an underlying unease she couldn't shake. She disliked judging customers, it felt unfair. But it was all too easy to get swept up in the gossip and playful banter of her coworkers. As Ella moved through the cafe, refilling coffee cups and clearing plates, snippets of her colleagues' conversations floated to her ears. They commented on customers' appearances, accents, and even their mannerisms. While some remarks were harmless observations, others carried a sharper, cutting tone that edged toward cruelty. Ella found herself laughing occasionally, even joining in on occasion, but each chuckle left a bitter taste. Deep down, she knew it was wrong to mock the very people who kept the cafe running. Yet the fear of seeming too serious or uptight in front of her coworkers kept her quiet. The gentle chime of the cafe door broke her thoughts, signaling the arrival of a new customer. Ella turned to see a woman stride in with poise and confidence. The woman's posture was impeccable, her head held high as she surveyed the room. She wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, the crisp white of her blouse contrasting beautifully against her rich brown skin. As the woman walked to an empty table near the window, the atmosphere in the cafe shifted noticeably. Ella sensed her coworkers' attention shift to the newcomer. Glances exchanged like whispered secrets. Chloe sidled up to her again, this time speaking in a hushed tone. "That's your table, Ella," she said, gesturing toward the woman. "But you don't have to rush. Maybe she'll get the hint and leave." Ella frowned, confusion knitting her brow. "What do you mean?" Chloe rolled her eyes, leaning in conspiratorially. "Come on. You know how they are, always complaining, never tipping. It's not worth the hassle." The implication hit Ella like a splash of cold water. Chloe's words carried a weight that Ella couldn't ignore, exposing an ugly truth she didn't want to confront. She knew immediately that this was wrong. Judging someone based on their race was not just unfair, but deeply prejudiced. Ella's gaze darted between her coworkers, their faces expectant. The pressure to conform was palpable, tightening her chest like a vice. Her notepad felt heavy in her hand as she hesitated, torn between what she knew was right and the unspoken expectations of her peers. She should approach the table, take the woman's order, and treat her with the same respect as anyone else. That was what decency demanded. But the weight of her colleagues' judgment pressed on her, freezing her in place. From across the room, the woman looked up, her eyes meeting Ella's. There was a question in her gaze, a silent call for service. Ella's cheeks flushed with shame, but her feet stayed rooted to the floor. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours as the cafe's lively atmosphere grew heavy with tension. Ella's mind raced, torn between her fear of alienating her coworkers and the knowledge that her inaction was profoundly wrong. The woman at the table glanced up, her gaze locking with Ella's. In her eyes was a silent, unspoken plea for service. Ella felt her cheeks grow hot, a wave of guilt crashing over her, yet her feet remained firmly planted, unwilling or unable to move. The seconds stretched unbearably, every tick of the clock magnifying the tension. The cafe, usually filled with the hum of cheerful chatter, seemed to still. Other patrons began to notice the woman sitting alone, untouched by the staff. Whispers started to ripple through the room, accompanied by subtle glances in Ella's direction. She could feel the weight of disapproval pressing down on her, like a stone lodged in her chest. Finally, the pressure became too much. With a deep, shaky breath, Ella turned away, pretending to busy herself wiping down the counter and straightening salt shakers. But no matter how much she tried to distract herself, she couldn't escape the sensation of the woman's eyes on her back, those eyes that held both pain and quiet indignation. Ella's hands moved mechanically, cleaning already spotless surfaces, while her mind churned. She couldn't shake the awful realization that she had made a grave mistake. The air in the cafe seemed thicker now, weighed down by an unspoken tension that no one dared to break. Meanwhile, the woman at the table, Naomi, as Ella would later learn, rose gracefully from her seat. Her face remained calm, composed, but her eyes betrayed a storm of emotions: disappointment, hurt, and a steely resolve. Without uttering a single word, Naomi collected her belongings. Her heels clicked rhythmically against the tiled floor as she strode towards the exit. When Naomi reached the door, she paused. Her gaze swept across the cafe one last time, briefly meeting Ella's. In that fleeting moment, Ella felt a wave of shame so powerful it nearly left her breathless. Then, with the soft chime of the doorbell, Naomi was gone, her presence lingering like an echo. The cafe collectively exhaled, as if a spell had been broken. Ella's coworkers exchanged relieved glances and subtle nods, as though they'd just dodged some kind of trouble. But for Ella, the relief was short-lived. Her hands trembled as she wiped down another table, the rag in her hand useless against the guilt that gnawed at her. She moved through her tasks like a puppet, her body on autopilot, while her mind replayed the scene over and over. The disappointment in Naomi's eyes haunted her. Ella knew she had crossed an invisible line, one that couldn't easily be undone. Outside, Naomi walked briskly down the street, her stride confident, her posture unbroken. But beneath the composed exterior, a fire burned. She had experienced prejudice before, far too many times to count, but this moment felt different. Perhaps because of the overt nature of the slight, or perhaps because it had happened in a cafe that she and her husband had built together. Once inside her car, Naomi took a deep, steadying breath and reached for her phone. She dialed a familiar number. After a few rings, a warm, deep voice answered. "This is Marcus." "Hey, it's me," Naomi said, her voice calm but laced with an unshakable resolve. "We need to talk about what just happened at your cafe on Sycamore Street." Marcus, the owner of the cafe chain, and Naomi's husband, listened attentively as she recounted the events. His initial shock quickly gave way to a simmering anger. "I can't believe this happened in one of our cafes," Marcus said, his voice tight with restrained emotion. "It goes against everything we've worked for, everything we stand for." "I know you'll handle it," Naomi replied. "But this isn't just about one incident. It's about something bigger. This kind of behavior, it's systemic. We need to address it at the root." Marcus nodded, even though she couldn't see him through the phone. "You're right," he said firmly. "This can't just be about fixing today. It has to be about changing the culture." Naomi appreciated Marcus's quick and decisive response. But as she ended the call, she knew the road ahead would be long. This wasn't just a single moment to correct. It was part of a much larger fight for respect, understanding, and equality. "This isn't just about me or this one cafe, Marcus," Naomi said firmly during their conversation. "We need to address the bigger picture." Her words stayed with Marcus long after their call ended. By the time they hung up, both Naomi and Marcus felt a renewed sense of determination. It wasn't enough to correct a single mistake. They needed to change the underlying attitudes that had allowed such an incident to occur. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. His presence immediately drew the attention of the staff as they trickled in, their expressions a mixture of surprise and apprehension. He wasn't often seen at this location, especially not at the start of a shift. Once everyone was present, Marcus called them together for an impromptu meeting. "Thank you all for gathering," he began, his voice firm but measured. "I want to address something serious that happened here yesterday." A hush fell over the group, the usual morning chatter replaced by a tense silence. Ella's pulse quickened as she realized where this was heading. Her palms grew clammy, and she clasped them tightly to keep from fidgeting. "A customer was ignored and made to feel unwelcome," Marcus continued. "And the reason? The color of her skin." His words cut through the air like a knife. Some of the staff shifted uncomfortably, while others avoided making eye contact altogether. Marcus let the weight of his statement linger before moving on. "I want to make one thing crystal clear," he said, his tone resolute. "Discrimination of any kind will not be tolerated in our cafes. Every person who walks through our doors deserves to be treated with respect, and dignity. No exceptions. Marcus outlined the cafe's core values, emphasizing the importance of creating an environment that welcomed everyone, regardless of their race, gender, or background. As he spoke, his eyes scanned the group, taking in their varied reactions. Ella couldn't bring herself to look up. Her mind raced, replaying the incident from the day before. She felt a confusing mix of shame, defensiveness, and guilt. She wanted to believe that her actions had been a fleeting mistake, a moment of poor judgment influenced by the pressure of her peers. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. Marcus's tone softened slightly as he continued. I understand that biases can be deeply ingrained. We all have prejudices, sometimes ones we aren't even aware of, but it's our responsibility to confront them and actively work to overcome them. He then announced the implementation of a new training program focused on diversity and inclusion. This isn't just about avoiding negative behavior, Marcus explained. It's about fostering a culture where everyone feels valued and respected. As the meeting drew to a close, Marcus made eye contact with each employee. I believe in second chances, he said, his voice steady but firm. But I also believe in accountability. Let this be a turning point for all of us. We can, and we must, do better. With that, he dismissed the group. The staff quietly dispersed, their usual light-hearted banter replaced by a solemn air. Ella lingered behind, rooted to the spot. Her thoughts swirled in a storm of confusion and regret. Mechanically, she began her opening duties, wiping down tables, organizing supplies, but her mind was far from the task at hand. She kept replaying Marcus's words, each one digging deeper into her conscience. Part of her wanted to cling to the idea that what had happened yesterday was an isolated incident, an anomaly in an otherwise fair-minded approach to her job. But the more she thought about it, the harder it was to deny the truth. Throughout her shift, Ella found herself hyper-aware of her interactions with customers. She noticed things she'd never paid attention to before. The subtle ways her tone shifted depending on who she was serving, the assumptions she made about people based on appearances alone. It was unsettling, this new lens through which she saw herself. But it was also undeniable. The ugliness of what had happened couldn't be dismissed as a one-time mistake. It was a wake-up call, one she couldn't ignore any longer. Ella knew she had a lot to think about, and even more to learn. Ella couldn't stop noticing things that had never registered before. The subtle ways her tone shifted, or how her posture changed depending on the customer she was serving. It was jarring to realize how ingrained these behaviors had become. As she wiped down tables and refilled salt shakers, bits of conversation from her coworkers drifted her way. Some staff members seemed genuinely affected by Marcus's speech, discussing how they could make the cafe more inclusive. Others, however, grumbled about political correctness and what they called an overreaction. Ella wasn't sure where she stood in all of this. A part of her wanted to believe the incident was an anomaly, but deep down, she knew it reflected something bigger. Ignoring it wasn't an option anymore. Meanwhile, across town, Naomi sat in her home office, her gaze fixed on the window as her thoughts churned. The events at the cafe had left her unsettled, but also motivated. She had faced moments like this before, yet this time felt different. Determined to channel her frustration into action, Naomi picked up her phone and called someone she trusted. "Hello?" came the familiar voice of Leah, a longtime friend and community organizer. "Leah, it's Naomi. I need your help with something important," she began, launching into an account of the cafe incident and her growing determination to tackle the larger issue of racial discrimination in their community. When she finished, Leah let out a thoughtful sigh. "What you're proposing isn't going to be easy," she said. "Changing deeply ingrained beliefs takes time and effort. Are you sure you're ready for this?" Naomi's response was immediate. "I have to be. If not me, then who? We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix this." Her conviction sparked a long brainstorming session between the two women. Over the next few hours, they sketched out ideas for workshops, community forums, and partnerships with local schools and businesses. "We need to make this relatable," Naomi emphasized. "People can dismiss statistics or abstract ideas, but real stories, genuine connections, those can change hearts." Leah nodded. "And we have to involve everyone. If this is seen as just a minority issue, it won't get the traction it needs. this affects the entire community. By the time the sun set, they had the framework of a plan. A comprehensive program designed to raise awareness about racial bias, promote empathy, and inspire action. The work ahead would be daunting, but Naomi felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about what had happened to her. It was about ensuring a better future for everyone in her community. The next morning, Naomi began reaching out to local organizations. She contacted civil rights groups, educational institutions, and community centers. Many were eager to participate, recognizing the importance of a coordinated effort. Naomi also spoke with Marcus about involving the cafe chain in the initiative. Marcus was not only supportive but enthusiastic. "This is a chance to turn a terrible incident into something positive," he said. As word of the project spread, it began to catch the attention of local media. A journalist from the city's leading newspaper reached out, intrigued by the idea of someone turning a personal experience of discrimination into a community-wide movement. When Naomi received the request for an interview, she took her time to consider how best to share her story. This wasn't just about her, it was about fostering a conversation that could reach everyone. Naomi carefully considered how to frame her message for the interview. She wanted to be transparent about her experience at the cafe, but didn't want to dwell on negativity. Her goal was to inspire change, not to shame or blame anyone. "What happened to me at the cafe is just one small example of the discrimination that happens every day," Naomi explained to the reporter. "But I truly believe that when given the opportunity to learn and grow, most people will choose to do better. That's the heart of this program, giving people that opportunity." As the interview wrapped up, the reporter asked Naomi, "If you could speak directly to the cafe staff, what would you say?" Naomi paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'd tell them I don't hold any ill will. We all have biases, sometimes ones we're not even aware of. What truly matters is what we do once we recognize them. My hope is that this becomes a chance for self-reflection and growth for all of us, and that they'll join me in working toward a more inclusive community." The article was published a few days later, and it struck a chord with readers. Naomi's inbox was soon flooded with messages of encouragement and offers from people eager to join her initiative. As she read through the emails, she felt a wave of emotions: hope for what they could accomplish, determination to move forward, and a tinge of sadness for the circumstances that had necessitated this effort. Above all, though, she felt ready for the road ahead. This was just the beginning. 1 week after the incident, Naomi decided to return to the cafe. She took a steadying breath before pushing open the door, the familiar chime announcing her entrance. Heads turned immediately, and a palpable tension spread through the room. Recognition dawned on the staff's faces, including Ella, who had been restocking napkins behind the counter. Ella froze in place, her heart pounding as she watched Naomi confidently approach. This time, a different server rushed forward to take Naomi's order, their demeanor overly polite, almost apologetic. Naomi accepted the interaction graciously, but let her eyes scan the room until they landed on Ella. Ella's heart sank as their gazes met. She braced herself for anger or disdain, but Naomi's expression was calm, her eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and determination. Summoning her courage, Naomi walked over to Ella, who instinctively took a small step back. "Hello," Naomi said, her voice steady but kind. "I believe we have some unfinished business. I'm Naomi." Ella swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. "I'm Ella. I'm sorry for what happened last time." Naomi nodded, acknowledging the apology without immediately accepting it. "I appreciate that, Ella," she said, her tone measured. "But I'm not here just for an apology. I'm here to invite you to something important." Confusion flickered across Ella's face. "Invite me? To what?" "I'm organizing a program," Naomi explained. "It's focused on understanding and addressing racial biases. I think it could be helpful for you, and maybe you could even bring something valuable to the discussions." Ella's first instinct was to refuse. The idea of confronting her actions head-on, and in front of others no less, was overwhelming. But as she met Naomi's steady gaze, she realized there was no judgment there, only an earnest desire for change. "I'll think about it," Ella said hesitantly. Naomi offered a small encouraging smile. "That's all I ask." With that, Naomi turned and left the cafe, her coffee in hand. Ella stood rooted in place, her mind swirling with emotions, fear, guilt, and something new, the faint stirrings of hope. I don't know, Ella stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not sure I'd even be welcome there. Naomi's expression softened, her tone calm and encouraging. That's exactly why you should come. This isn't about pointing fingers or shaming anyone. It's about learning and growing together. Ella hesitated, the weight of the invitation pressing down on her. After a long moment of internal struggle, she nodded slowly. Okay, I'll come. Naomi smiled, reaching into her bag and handing Ella a flyer with the details of the first meeting. Thank you, Ella, she said warmly. It takes courage to confront our own biases. I look forward to seeing you there. As Naomi exited the cafe, Ella stood frozen, the flyer clutched tightly in her hand. A swirl of emotions churned inside her. Fear, shame, and buried beneath it all, a faint glimmer of hope. The day of the first meeting arrived much faster than Ella had expected. She stood outside the community center, nervously fiddling with the strap of her bag. Several times she thought about turning back, but the memory of Naomi's earnest invitation kept her feet moving forward. Inside, the room was set up with chairs arranged in a welcoming circle. To her surprise, Ella recognized a few familiar faces from around town, and even some of her coworkers from the cafe. Her anxiety spiked, but then she saw Naomi waving her over with a warm smile. Ella took a seat, her heart pounding. Naomi opened the session by introducing the program's purpose and structure. We're here to share our experiences, listen to one another, and learn, she said, her voice steady and compassionate. This is a safe space for honest conversation. The first activity was a simple icebreaker. Each participant shared a time when they felt like an outsider. As Ella listened to the stories of others, she began to feel her nerves ease. It turned out that everyone there, in some way, had experienced exclusion or judgment. When it was Ella's turn to speak, she felt her hands tremble as she took a deep breath. I'm here because I made a mistake, she admitted, her voice shaky. I judged someone based on their race, and I'm ashamed of it. I want to understand why I did it and how to do better. Her vulnerability hung in the air, but the group's response was supportive. Nods of encouragement rippled around the circle, and Naomi offered her a reassuring smile. As the meeting progressed, the participants shared deeply personal accounts of discrimination they had experienced or witnessed. Ella found herself profoundly moved. She had always known racism existed, but hearing these first-hand stories made it more real than any abstract statistic ever could. One story struck her particularly hard. An older man named Harold, a respected physician, recounted how he had been mistaken for a janitor at his own hospital multiple times. It's not just about that one moment, Harold explained, his voice heavy with emotion. It's the cumulative effect. Over a lifetime, it wears you down, makes you question your place in the world. A lump formed in Ella's throat as she realized the far-reaching impact her actions at the cafe might have had on Naomi. It wasn't just about one ignored customer. It was about contributing to a pattern of experiences that could erode someone's sense of belonging. As the meeting concluded, Ella felt drained but oddly lighter, as though she had taken the first step toward shedding an invisible burden. As people began to leave, Naomi approached her. "Thank you for coming, Ella," she said softly. "How are you feeling?" Ella considered the question for a moment. "Overwhelmed," she admitted, "but also grateful. Grateful for the chance to learn and do better." Naomi nodded, her understanding smile never wavering. "That's a good place to start." "I hope we'll see you at the next meeting," Naomi said as the group dispersed for the evening. Ella walked home, her mind brimming with new ideas and unsettling realizations. The evening had stirred questions she wasn't yet sure how to answer. But for the first time, she felt like she was finally on the right path. In the weeks that followed, Ella became deeply engaged in the program. Each session offered new insights, and the candid discussions opened her eyes to aspects of the world she had never noticed before. She began recognizing subtle forms of discrimination that had previously flown under her radar. It was during one of these meetings that Ella met Darius, a local artist whose work often explored social justice themes. His eloquent contributions and thought-provoking questions quickly made him a key voice in the group. After one particularly intense discussion, Ella approached him. Your perspective is so insightful, she said. How did you develop such a clear understanding of these issues? Darius smiled knowingly. A lot of experience, he said. And plenty of hard conversations, with myself and with others. He paused, studying Ella's earnest expression. Actually, I'm working on a new series of paintings about identity and prejudice. If you're interested, you should stop by my studio sometime. I could use a fresh pair of eyes. Ella eagerly accepted. She saw it as an opportunity to learn and reflect further, beyond the structure of their regular meetings. The following weekend, Ella arrived at Darius's studio, a converted warehouse filled with canvases in various stages of completion. The space was alive with creativity, each painting telling a story. As Darius showed her around, explaining his artistic process and the narratives behind his work, Ella felt a mix of awe and unease. One painting in particular caught her attention. It depicted a young black man, his face a blend of frustration and resignation, surrounded by countless white hands pointing accusatory fingers. That one, Darius said, noticing her focus, is about the constant scrutiny and judgment so many of us endure. The assumption of guilt before innocence. Ella swallowed hard. The painting's message was painfully clear, and it brought back memories of her own assumptions about Naomi that day in the cafe. It's powerful, she said quietly, and hard to look at. Darius nodded thoughtfully. That's what art should do. It should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. As their conversation continued, Darius shared more of his personal experiences with racism. He spoke of being followed in stores, of job opportunities vanishing when he appeared in person, and of the unrelenting pressure to prove his worth in spaces where others were automatically accepted. It's exhausting, he admitted, always being on guard, always representing your entire race in every interaction. Ella listened intently, her heart heavy with the weight of what she was hearing. I never realized, she admitted. I mean, I knew racism existed, but I didn't understand how it touches every part of life. That's why these conversations matter, Darius said gently. When you don't see its daily impact, it's easy to dismiss racism as something distant. Their discussion eventually turned to Ella's own journey. She confessed her lingering guilt over what had happened with Naomi and her struggles to confront her biases. Darius leaned back thoughtfully. Guilt can be a good starting point, he said. But it shouldn't be the end goal. The real question is, what are you going to do with that feeling? His words struck a deep chord with Ella. She realized she had been so focused on her shame that she hadn't thought about the next steps. I want to do something, she said with quiet determination. Darius smiled, his expression both encouraging and curious. Then let's figure out what that looks like. I want to make a difference, Ella said suddenly, surprising even herself with the strength of her conviction. But I don't know where to start. Darius smiled gently. That's a good place to begin. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is share your own story of growth. Your journey, from that day in the cafe to now, is a story that could resonate with so many people. As Ella left Darius's studio, her mind buzzed with new ideas. She felt a growing need to express the emotions and revelations swirling within her, but wasn't sure how. That night, unable to sleep, she picked up her long-neglected guitar. As her fingers strummed the strings, a melody began to take shape. At first, the words came hesitantly, but soon they began to flow freely. She sang about ignorance and awakening, the pain of confronting her own prejudices, and the hope for change. The song was raw and imperfect, but it felt deeply authentic. As the final notes faded, Ella realized tears were streaming down her face. They weren't tears of guilt or shame, but of release, a weight lifting off her shoulders. Over the next few weeks, Ella immersed herself in her music with newfound passion. She wrote song after song, each one exploring different facets of her journey and the stories she had heard through the community program. Her coworkers at the cafe began noticing the shift in her demeanor. Gone was the hesitant, easily influenced girl who had avoided Naomi that day. In her place stood a more thoughtful, confident young woman, unafraid to challenge prejudiced remarks when she heard them. One afternoon, as Ella hummed one of her new songs while wiping down tables, her manager approached her. "You know," he said with a smile, "we've been thinking about hosting live music on the weekends. Would you be interested in performing?" Ella's heart raced at the idea. This was her chance to share her music and her message with a broader audience. But it also meant exposing her vulnerability and owning up to her past mistakes. After a moment of hesitation, she nodded. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'd like that very much." As she returned to her work, Ella felt a sense of purpose settle over her. She knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, she felt she was on the right path. Her music would be her way of contributing to the broader conversation, helping others understand and grow as she had. With each chord she played and each lyric she wrote, Ella wasn't just discovering her voice as an artist. She was becoming a person committed to meaningful change. Ella's involvement in the community program deepened in the weeks that followed. She eagerly anticipated each meeting, finding the group to be a safe space for exploring challenging topics and questioning her assumptions. During one particularly impactful session, the facilitator asked participants to share personal stories of growth or moments of realization related to racial issues. As others spoke, Ella felt a growing urge to contribute. Her heart raced as she finally raised her hand. I'd like to share something," she said, her voice trembling slightly. All eyes turned to her, including Naomi's, who gave her an encouraging nod. Ella took a deep breath and began. "A few months ago, I was the one who ignored Naomi at the cafe." A collective gasp filled the room, and Ella's cheeks burned with shame. But she pressed on. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about why I did what I did. It wasn't just peer pressure." "It wasn't just peer pressure," Ella admitted, her voice steadying as she continued. "It was years of unchallenged assumptions and stereotypes, things I'd never really taken the time to question." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Being part of this group has opened my eyes. I've learned so much about the daily realities of racism, about my own privilege, and about the power we all have to make a difference." Ella went on to describe her journey over the past few months, the deep conversations with Darius, the intense self-reflection, and how she turned to music as a way to process her emotions and raise awareness. "I'm not proud of who I was that day in the cafe," she said, her voice tinged with regret, but also determination. "But I'm working hard to become someone I can be proud of. Someone who stands up against racism, instead of perpetuating it." When Ella finished speaking, the room was silent. She held her breath, afraid to meet the eyes of the group, fearing judgment or condemnation. But then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the room. She looked up to see faces filled with empathy and encouragement. Naomi rose from her seat and walked over, wrapping Ella in a warm hug. "Thank you for your honesty," Naomi said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your story is exactly why we're doing this work. It proves that change is possible." The facilitator thanked Ella for her bravery and opened the floor for discussion. What followed was one of the most powerful conversations Ella had ever been a part of. A deep dive into personal growth, the courage it takes to confront ingrained biases, and the importance of creating safe spaces for transformation. As the meeting came to an end, several group members approached Ella to thank her for her candor. Many shared how her story had inspired them to reflect on their own attitudes and behaviors. Darius, who had been observing quietly from the corner, approached her with a broad smile. "You did good, kid," he said, giving her a playful nudge. "That took guts." Ella felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For so long she had carried the shame of her actions that day in the cafe. Now, instead of judgment, she was met with understanding and support. As she gathered her belongings to leave, Naomi approached her again. "Ella, I've been thinking," she said, her tone thoughtful. "The story you shared today, it's powerful. I think it could really resonate with people, especially those who might be hesitant to engage in conversations about race." Ella tilted her head, intrigued. "What are you suggesting?" "Well," Naomi said, "we've been looking for ways to expand our outreach. Would you consider sharing your story more publicly? Perhaps at one of our larger events or even with local media?" The thought of opening up to an even wider audience made Ella's stomach flutter with nerves. The idea of reliving her mistakes in front of strangers was daunting. But she couldn't deny the potential impact. If her story could help others confront their own biases and inspire change, wasn't that worth the discomfort? "I think I'd like that," Ella said after a moment, her voice steady. It's scary, but if it can help, I want to do it. Naomi beamed, her smile full of pride. That's wonderful. Your courage is going to make a difference, Ella. Ella, your courage in confronting your past and your dedication to growth, that's a powerful message, Naomi said. It shows that change is possible, and that we can all learn and do better. As Ella left the community center that evening, a mixture of emotions swirled within her. She was nervous about the idea of sharing her story more publicly, but a strong sense of purpose and hope buoyed her. By openly acknowledging her mistake and her journey toward change, Ella realized she wasn't just transforming herself. She was potentially inspiring others to begin their own journeys of reflection and growth. That night, fueled by the day's events, Ella picked up her guitar. She let the emotions of the moment guide her as she began composing a new song. The lyrics spoke of transformation, of building bridges between people, and of the power of honest conversations to shift hearts and minds. As she strummed the final chords, Ella felt a growing sense of resolve. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth. There would be hard conversations, moments of self-doubt, and likely some resistance. But she also knew she wasn't alone anymore. She had found a community of support, and together, they were working toward a more understanding and equitable world. Her music, once a personal dream of stardom, had evolved into a tool for social change, a way to touch hearts, open minds, and, just maybe, make the world a little bit better. In the days that followed, Ella and Naomi began working closely together, brainstorming ways to share Ella's story more broadly. During one planning session, Ella suggested, "What if we host a fundraising event at the cafe?" That's where this all began, and it would be a powerful symbol of how much has changed. Naomi's eyes lit up. That's a fantastic idea. It would show the community what transformation looks like and invite them to be part of it. As they delved into the logistics, Ella felt her excitement grow. This was a chance to use her music for something bigger than herself, to contribute to a cause that truly mattered. However, not everyone was supportive of the idea. When Ella shared the plans with her coworkers at the cafe, the reactions were mixed. Some were enthusiastic, applauding her for taking a stand, but others were visibly uncomfortable. "Do we really need to make such a big deal out of this?" asked Liam, a colleague, frowning. "Can't we just move on and forget about it?" Ella took a deep breath, drawing on what she had learned through the program. "Moving on without addressing the issue doesn't fix anything," she explained patiently. "This event isn't about dredging up the past, it's about learning from it and creating something positive for the future." Despite her calm explanation, she could see that Liam and a few others remained skeptical. Their discomfort served as a stark reminder that not everyone was as ready for these conversations as the group she had been working with. Undeterred, Ella and Naomi pressed forward with their plans. They contacted local musicians, storytellers, and community leaders, inviting them to participate in the event. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many eager to contribute their talents and perspectives. Though challenges lay ahead, Ella felt a deep conviction in their mission. The event wasn't just an opportunity to share her story, it was a chance to spark dialogue, foster understanding, and build a stronger, more united community. Ella and Naomi reached out to local musicians, activists, and community leaders, inviting them to join their event. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Many were eager to contribute their talents and perspectives, inspired by the purpose of fostering dialogue and understanding. As the day of the event drew closer, Ella faced a personal hurdle. She had been working on a song specifically for the occasion, one that encapsulated her journey and the lessons she'd learned. But as she rehearsed, doubts crept in. What if they don't like it? She confided in Darius during one of their regular meetups. What if they think I'm just trying to make myself look good or that I'm not sincere? Darius listened thoughtfully before replying, "Ella, it's your sincerity that makes your story so powerful. You're not pretending to be perfect. You're showing that growth is possible. And that's what people need to see." His reassurance bolstered her confidence, though the nerves remained. The big day arrived, and the cafe was transformed for the event. A small stage stood in one corner, and the tables were arranged to create a warm, intimate setting. Flyers decorated the walls, and a soft buzz of anticipation filled the air. Ella peeked out from the back room, her heart pounding. She saw familiar faces from the community program, curious locals who had responded to the flyers, and even a few reporters from local media outlets. Naomi stood at the door, warmly welcoming each guest. The event began with Naomi giving a brief introduction, explaining the purpose of the gathering and the journey that had brought them to this moment. Then, it was Ella's turn to take the stage. As she stepped up to the microphone, her guitar slung over her shoulder, Ella scanned the crowd. She spotted Darius giving her a supportive thumbs up, Naomi smiling encouragingly, and even Liam sitting in the back, looking a little uncomfortable but present nonetheless. "Hi everyone," Ella began, her voice shaky but steadying with each word. "A few months ago, I did something I'm not proud of. Right here in this cafe. Today, I want to share the story of what happened after that day and the journey it set me on." As Ella spoke, she wove her narrative with the song she had written, her voice carrying the raw emotion of her experience. The lyrics spoke of regret, awakening, and hope for change. The atmosphere in the room shifted as people leaned in, listening intently. She noticed nods of recognition, widened eyes of understanding, and even a few tears. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, but it was the expressions in the crowd that stayed with her. Her words and music had sparked something real. A connection, a willingness to engage. The event transitioned into an open dialogue. Attendees began sharing their own experiences, asking questions, and participating in honest, sometimes difficult conversations about race, privilege, and understanding. As the evening wound down, Ella found herself surrounded by people eager to talk, to share their thoughts, and to ask how they could get involved. Even Liam approached her, his usual skepticism replaced by a thoughtful expression. "I didn't really get it before," he admitted, "but listening to you tonight, it made me think about things I've never really considered before. Thanks for that." Ella felt a wave of emotion rise within her. This moment, this event, was more than she could have imagined when she first began this journey. Across the room, Ella caught Naomi's eye. They shared a smile, a silent exchange of triumph and hope. As the last of the attendees filtered out, Ella felt an overwhelming sense of purpose and gratitude. What had begun as a painful mistake had transformed into something deeply meaningful, a catalyst for change and connection. Ella helped clean up the cafe, her mind swirling with the conversations she had shared and the connections that had blossomed throughout the evening. She realized this event wasn't the conclusion of something. It was the beginning of a larger journey. It marked the first step toward fostering a more empathetic and understanding community. As she folded the last chair, Naomi approached her, her face beaming with pride. "You did it, Ella," she said, pulling her into a warm hug. "You turned a moment of prejudice into a catalyst for change. I'm so proud of you." Ella returned the hug, a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration washing over her. "We did it," she corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, the program, or everyone who supported us." Together, they locked up the cafe and stepped out into the cool night air. Ella felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew there were still many challenges ahead, difficult conversations to navigate and obstacles to overcome, but she also knew she wasn't alone. She was part of a growing community committed to growth, understanding, and positive change. With her guitar slung over her shoulder and her heart full of hope, Ella walked home, already envisioning the next steps in their mission to build a more inclusive and compassionate world. In the days following the cafe event, Ella and Naomi found themselves at the forefront of a burgeoning movement. The local newspaper featured an article about their initiative, praising their innovative approach to addressing racial issues through personal storytelling and music. The publicity brought both opportunities and challenges. Schools, community centers, and even organizations in neighboring towns began reaching out, eager to host similar events. While the interest was thrilling, it was also overwhelming. "I never expected this to blow up like it has," Ella admitted to Naomi during one of their planning sessions. "It's amazing, but I'm just a waitress who writes songs. What do I know about leading a movement?" Naomi smiled reassuringly. "You're much more than that, Ella. You're someone who had the courage to confront your own biases and share your journey openly. That's powerful, but I understand it's a lot. We're navigating uncharted waters here." They decided to focus on manageable goals, starting with events within their own community before expanding outward. They also reached out to other members of their group, inviting them to share their stories and perspectives alongside Ella's. As they planned their next event, Ella poured herself into her music. Her work evolved, becoming richer and more nuanced as she explored complex themes of identity, privilege, and social change. She began collaborating with other local musicians, including some she had met through Darius. Together, they created a sound that reflected the multicultural nature of their message. The day of their second major event arrived, held in the auditorium of a local high school. The space buzzed with energy, packed to capacity with students, teachers, parents, and community members. Naomi opened the program, introducing the initiative and explaining its goals. One by one, members of their group took the stage to share their experiences. Dr. Harris, a respected physician, spoke about the subtle but persistent racism he faced in his profession. How he was often mistaken for a janitor despite his credentials. His story was met with gasps of disbelief and thoughtful silence. Ella sat backstage, her guitar resting in her lap, feeling the weight of the stories shared and the responsibility of her own role. This was no longer just about her. It was about amplifying voices, fostering understanding, and building bridges. As she prepared to take the stage, Ella felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just a performance. It was a step forward in a much larger movement. Dr. Harris, a distinguished physician, shared his story about the subtle yet persistent racism he encountered in his profession. He spoke of being mistaken for a janitor, despite his qualifications, and the frustration of having to prove himself constantly. Next was Maria, a Latina business owner who recounted her struggles with stereotypes, how assumptions about her background often overshadowed her achievements. Each story was unique, yet they were woven together by shared experiences and collective hopes for a more equitable future. When it was Ella's turn, a familiar flutter of nerves rose in her chest, but with it came a sense of growing confidence. She began with her story, now polished but no less heartfelt, before transitioning into her music. Her newest song, a powerful ballad about breaking down walls and building bridges, filled the auditorium. As Ella sang, she noticed something extraordinary happening in the audience. People were joining hands, swaying to the rhythm. Some had tears streaming down their faces. The energy in the room was palpable, a mixture of sorrow for past injustices and hope for a brighter, more inclusive future. After the performances, the event shifted into breakout sessions. Attendees gathered in smaller groups to discuss the stories and themes raised during the evening. Ella found herself surrounded by high school students eager to share their thoughts and ask questions. One shy girl named Lila approached Ella hesitantly after the session. "Your story, it made me think about things I've done. Assumptions I've made," she said, her voice trembling slightly. How do you start to change?" Ella felt a wave of empathy for the girl, remembering her own uncertainty at the beginning of her journey. "It starts with being willing to question yourself," she replied gently, "to listen to other people's experiences and really hear them. It's not always easy, but it's so important." As the event wound down, Ella and Naomi were surrounded by attendees eager to get involved. People offered their support and shared ideas for promoting inclusivity within the community. "We've started something big here," Naomi said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Something that could really make a difference." Ella nodded, feeling a blend of exhaustion and exhilaration. "It's incredible, but also a little scary. Where do we go from here?" Their answer came sooner than expected. As they packed up the last of their materials, a woman approached them, introducing herself as a representative from the mayor's office. "The mayor has been following your initiative with great interest," she said warmly. "He'd like to meet with you to discuss how the city can support and expand your efforts." Ella and Naomi exchanged surprised but thrilled glances. This was an opportunity they hadn't imagined, a chance to bring about change on a much larger scale. As they walked out into the warm evening air, the buzz of conversation from attendees still filled the night. Ella couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come since that fateful day in the cafe. "You know," she said, glancing at Naomi, "when I first started this journey, I thought it was about making up for a mistake. but it's become so much more than that. Naomi nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's about creating a community where those kinds of mistakes become less and less common, a place where understanding and empathy are the norm, not the exception. Ella smiled, strumming an absent-minded chord on her guitar as they walked. Exactly, and we're just getting started. As they parted ways for the evening, both women felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. They had seen the impact of their efforts firsthand, the conversations they had sparked, the minds they had opened, and the changes they had inspired. They knew there was still much work to be done, but they were ready to face it together. There were undoubtedly challenges ahead, but the possibilities were just as profound. With every story shared, every song sung, and each honest conversation, Ella and Naomi were leading their community toward a more inclusive and understanding future. For Ella, who had once been frozen by shame over her past actions, this journey had transformed into a source of pride and purpose, a way to turn a moment of ignorance into a lifetime of positive action. The meeting with Mayor Anderson, a progressive leader with a strong commitment to community development, marked a significant turning point. He listened intently to Ella and Naomi's presentation, nodding thoughtfully. "What you've started here is exactly what this city needs," Mayor Anderson said, leaning forward in his chair. "We want to support you in expanding this program. How can we help?" For the next hour, they discussed ideas ranging from funding additional events to integrating their program into local school curricula, and even the possibility of launching a citywide awareness campaign. As they left City Hall, Ella felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. "This is huge, Naomi. Are we ready for something this big?" Naomi squeezed Ella's hand. "We'll learn as we go. And remember, we're not in this alone." True to her words, their network of supporters continued to grow. Local businesses stepped up with sponsorships, volunteers offered to help organize events, and more people came forward to share their stories. One particularly exciting development came when a local news station expressed interest in doing a feature on their initiative. During a pre-interview meeting, Maria, the producer, explained what drew her to their work. "Your story is so compelling," Maria told Ella. "A young woman confronting her own biases and using music to promote change. It's exactly the kind of narrative that resonates with viewers." On the day of the interview, Ella sat in front of the cameras with Naomi by her side for support. When the interviewer asked her to recount her experience, Ella took a deep breath and began. She spoke candidly about the incident at the cafe, not shying away from the uncomfortable details. She also shared her journey since that day, the lessons she had learned, the personal growth she had experienced, and the changes she had witnessed in herself and her community through the initiative. "It's not about feeling guilty," Ella explained, her voice steady. "It's about recognizing our biases, confronting them, and actively working to be better. And it's about creating spaces where we can have these difficult conversations openly and honestly." When asked to perform one of her songs, Ella chose her latest composition, a powerful piece celebrating the strength found in diversity and the beauty of a united community. As she sang, she noticed members of the camera crew nodding along, visibly moved by the lyrics. After the interview, Maria approached them, her eyes sparkling. "This is going to make a fantastic piece," she said. "I think your message will really touch people." The impact of the television feature exceeded all expectations. In the days following the broadcast, their initiative's social media accounts were flooded with messages of support and inquiries about getting involved. People from neighboring cities reached out, eager to learn how to start similar programs in their own communities. Amidst the whirlwind of activity, Ella and Naomi took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. The road ahead remained daunting, but with every step, their vision of a more understanding, empathetic world felt increasingly attainable. Ella received an unexpected phone call one afternoon. It was from a record producer who had seen her recent interview. "Your music is powerful, Ella," he said, "and the message behind it is important. We'd like to discuss the possibility of recording an album." The offer was thrilling, a chance to reach an even larger audience with her songs and their message. But it also left her conflicted. Would pursuing a music career pull her away from the grassroots work she had been doing with Naomi? Unsure of what to do, Ella found herself back at Darius's studio, seeking his perspective. This could be a fantastic opportunity, Darius mused, his eyes focused on one of his canvases. Music has always been a driving force for social change. Think about the civil rights movement or the protest songs of the 60s. Your work could reach people who might never step foot into one of your events. Ella nodded, absorbing his words. But I don't want to lose the connection with the community. The conversations we've been having, that direct engagement feels so important. Darius turned to her with a thoughtful expression. Who says you have to choose? Maybe this is your chance to bridge both worlds. Use your music to spread the message farther, and let your platform strengthen the work you're already doing with Naomi. Ella left the studio with a renewed sense of clarity. This opportunity wasn't a diversion, it was an extension of her journey. She called Naomi to share the news and her thoughts on moving forward. "This is incredible, Ella," Naomi exclaimed, her excitement palpable. "And I think you're right. This could amplify our message in ways we've never imagined. Your music could open doors that might otherwise remain shut." Over the next few weeks, Ella threw herself into preparations for the album. She collaborated closely with the producer, ensuring that her themes of unity and understanding remained central to every track. As she stood in the recording studio, singing into the microphone, Ella felt a profound sense of purpose. She thought back to that day in the cafe, the moment that had sparked this unexpected path. From ignorance and regret, she had grown into someone determined to be a force for positive change. Each lyric she sang and every story she shared felt like a contribution to a broader narrative of growth, empathy, and hope for a more inclusive future. As Ella's music career began to take off and the community initiative continued to thrive, not everyone in town was pleased with the changes. Liam, her former co-worker at the cafe who had been skeptical from the start, grew increasingly resentful of the attention Ella was receiving. One evening, as Ella prepared for a small concert at the cafe, Liam approached her with a forced smile. "Big night, huh?" he said, his tone flat. Ella nodded, sensing an undercurrent of tension in his voice. "Yeah, it should be great. Are you coming to watch?" Liam's smile faltered. "Nah, I've got other plans," he muttered, gesturing vaguely toward the cafe's decor, posters promoting unity and understanding. "Besides, I'm getting a bit tired of all this." Ella frowned, concerned by his attitude. "Liam, is something bothering you? If it is, we can talk." But Liam just shrugged, walking off before she could say more. As Ella turned back to her preparations, a wave of unease settled over her. Not everyone in the community was ready for the changes she and Naomi were advocating, and that resistance was becoming harder to ignore. Ella received an unexpected phone call one afternoon. It was from a record producer who had seen her recent interview. "Your music is powerful, Ella," he said, "and the message behind it is important. We'd like to discuss the possibility of recording an album." The offer was thrilling, a chance to reach an even larger audience with her songs and their message. But it also left her conflicted. Would pursuing a music career pull her away from the grassroots work she had been doing with Naomi? Unsure of what to do, Ella found herself back at Darius's studio, seeking his perspective. This could be a fantastic opportunity, Darius mused, his eyes focused on one of his canvases. Music has always been a driving force for social change. Think about the civil rights movement or the protest songs of the 60s. Your work could reach people who might never step foot into one of your events. Ella nodded, absorbing his words. But I don't want to lose the connection with the community. The conversations we've been having, that direct engagement feels so important. Darius turned to her with a thoughtful expression. Who says you have to choose? Maybe this is your chance to bridge both worlds. Use your music to spread the message farther, and let your platform strengthen the work you're already doing with Naomi. Ella left the studio with a renewed sense of clarity. This opportunity wasn't a diversion. It was an extension of her journey. She called Naomi to share the news and her thoughts on moving forward. "This is incredible, Ella," Naomi exclaimed, her excitement palpable. "And I think you're right. This could amplify our message in ways we've never imagined. Your music could open doors that might otherwise remain shut." Over the next few weeks, Ella threw herself into preparations for the album. She collaborated closely with the producer, ensuring that her themes of unity and understanding remained central to every track. As she stood in the recording studio singing into the microphone, Ella felt a profound sense of purpose. She thought back to that day in the cafe, the moment that had sparked this unexpected path. From ignorance and regret, she had grown into someone determined to be a force for positive change. Each lyric she sang and every story she shared felt like a contribution to a broader narrative of growth, empathy, and hope for a more inclusive future. As Ella's music career began to take off and the community initiative continued to thrive, not everyone in town was pleased with the changes. Liam, her former coworker at the cafe who had been skeptical from the start, grew increasingly resentful of the attention Ella was receiving. One evening, as Ella prepared for a small concert at the cafe, Liam approached her with a forced smile. "Big night, huh?" he said, his tone flat. Ella nodded, sensing an undercurrent of tension in his voice. "Yeah, it should be great. Are you coming to watch?" Liam's smile faltered. "Nah, I've got other plans," he muttered, gesturing vaguely toward the cafe's decor, posters promoting unity and understanding. "Besides, I'm getting a bit tired of all this." Ella frowned, concerned by his attitude. "Liam, is something bothering you? If it is, we can talk." But Liam just shrugged, walking off before she could say more. As Ella turned back to her preparations, a wave of unease settled over her. Not everyone in the community was ready for the changes she and Naomi were advocating, and that resistance was becoming harder to ignore. "Liam, is everything okay?" Ella asked gently, noticing his tense demeanor. "You know you can talk to me if something's bothering you." Liam's forced composure cracked, revealing simmering anger beneath the surface. "You want to know what's bothering me? This whole thing is a sham. You made one mistake, and now you're acting like some kind of savior. It's ridiculous." His outburst caught the attention of others in the cafe, including Naomi, who had just walked in. She approached cautiously, sensing the tension in the air. "Liam," Ella began, keeping her voice steady and calm, "this isn't about me being a savior. It's about learning from mistakes and trying to create positive change." But Liam wasn't ready to listen. His voice rose as frustration poured out. "You know what? I'm sick of feeling guilty for being white. I'm tired of having to watch every word I say. This whole thing has gone way too far." With that, Liam stormed out of the cafe, leaving Ella and Naomi exchanging worried glances. They had encountered resistance before, but this level of anger was new. "I'll talk to him," Naomi said softly. "Sometimes people lash out when they feel threatened or uncomfortable. He might just need someone to listen." Ella nodded, though the encounter left her uneasy. Later that evening, Ella's concert at the cafe went well, drawing a full house of supportive faces. As she packed up her guitar afterward, she noticed something strange. Her notebook, where she kept her song lyrics and notes for the initiative, was missing. A sick feeling settled in her stomach as she retraced her steps. She quickly found Naomi and explained the situation. "Do you think Liam might have taken it?" Naomi asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Before Ella could respond, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an alert for a new social media post. Someone had created a page mocking their initiative, using quotes from Ella's notebook taken out of context to portray her as insincere and hypocritical. Ella's heart sank as she scrolled through the comments, watching the negativity spread like wildfire. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. Naomi took a deep breath, her eyes a mix of determination and compassion. "We face this head-on. We've always been about honest conversations, and this is just another opportunity to have one." Over the next few days, Ella and Naomi worked tirelessly to address the situation. Instead of reacting with anger, they reached out to Liam, inviting him to talk. They also organized an open forum where people could express their frustrations and concerns about the initiative. The forum was tense at first. Some attendees echoed Liam's sentiments, expressing feelings of blame or exclusion. But as the conversation progressed, something remarkable began to happen. People started to truly listen to one another, sharing their fears, frustrations, and hopes openly. Ella stood up to address the group. "I'm not perfect," she said, her voice steady. "I'm still learning and growing. This initiative isn't about blame or guilt. It's about understanding each other better and creating a community where everyone feels valued and heard." Her words seemed to resonate. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Even Liam, who had reluctantly attended, seemed to soften as he listened to others' experiences. By the end of the night, there was a sense of cautious optimism in the air. The forum didn't solve everything, but it was a start, a chance to bridge divides and move forward together. After the forum, Liam approached Ella and Naomi, his expression softened and his voice rough with emotion. I'm sorry, he began. I was scared. I felt like I was being pushed aside, but I see now that wasn't your intention. Ella felt a wave of relief wash over her. Thank you, Liam, she said sincerely. And I'm sorry, too, if we ever made you feel excluded. Your voice matters in this conversation as much as anyone else's. In the aftermath of this challenge, Ella and Naomi reflected on what they had learned. It became clear that for their initiative to truly succeed, it needed to be inclusive in every sense. They realized the importance of addressing fears and concerns from all corners of the community. They began actively incorporating more diverse voices into their programs, ensuring that everyone felt seen and heard. They created spaces where people could openly express their anxieties without fear of judgment, fostering deeper understanding and stronger connections. Ella's music evolved alongside the initiative. Her newest songs delved into themes of forgiveness, personal growth, and the emotional complexities of confronting one's biases. Months later, Ella stood on stage at her album release party. The crowd before her was a tapestry of the community she had grown to love, people from all walks of life who had come together in the name of unity and progress. She scanned the room, spotting Naomi beaming proudly in the front row, Darius giving her a thumbs up, and even Liam nodding along to the beat. This song is for all of us, Ella said into the microphone, her voice steady and heartfelt. For every mistake we've made, every hard conversation we've had, and every step we've taken together toward understanding. We're not perfect, but we're trying, and that's what matters. As the first chords rang out, Ella felt a profound sense of gratitude. What had started as a moment of shame and regret in a small cafe had grown into something far greater. A movement, a community united by shared growth and resilience. The journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges to face, more difficult conversations to navigate, and more opportunities for growth. But as Ella sang her heart out, she knew they were on the right path. A path defined by empathy, understanding, and hope for a better future. And with each note she played, she celebrated not only her own transformation, but the power of a community coming together to build something stronger, kinder, and more inclusive. But